My name is Kätlin Pulk and I'm Associate Professor of Organizational Studies at the Estonian Business School, where I also serve as a Vice Rector of Research and Head of Doctoral Studies. Today it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the doctoral defense of Konstantinos Stephanou, who will defend his thesis titled The Dark and the Bright Side of Empowering Leadership, the role of empathy in times of uncertainty. I will serve as head of the Defense Committee. Besides me, I'm very glad that we have the first opponent, Professor Levente Littvay, who is Professor in Political Science in Central European University, Budapest, Hungary. We have the second opponent from the University of Tartu, Associate Professor Kurmet Kivipõld, who is Associate Professor of Management. The agenda for today, in very brief, is that next our Secretary of the Defense Committee will introduce shortly the candidate. This will follow I would say the main part of today's event, which is the presentation of doctoral thesis or presentation of doctoral candidate Konstantinos Stephanou, following academic debate with first opponent, Professor Levente Littvay, approximately half of hour, and the second half of hour is devoted to the debate with Kurmet Kivipõld. There is a time for the questions from audience, so please be active and send in your questions. And we will finalize this main part with also the little introductory or kind of overview words or summary words with Konstantinos' supervisor, Martínez-Córcoles. After this main session, the committee will go for a break to vote for the final result of the day, and then we will be soon, hopefully, back in this room to announce the results of our voting. So, please, Kaisa, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Honorable chairperson of the committee, members of the committee, supervisor, and the defendant. Konstantinos Stephanou has presented all the documents that are necessary according to the procedure for successful completion of doctoral program and defense of EBS. He has presented the thesis titled The Dark and the Bright Side of Empowering Leadership, the Role of Empathy in Times of Uncertainty. The set of documents which Konstantinos Stephanou has presented also contains a copy of his master's diploma from Tallinn University of Technology. Konstantinos Stephanou has fulfilled the requirement of the curriculum of doctoral studies in management to defend the doctoral thesis and acquired the necessary amount of credit points. On November 10, 2021, the Research and Development Council of the Estonian Business School admitted Konstantinos Stephanou to defend the dissertation for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in Management. The board also set the date of the defense. The defense committee of Konstantinos Stephanou's doctoral thesis was confirmed with the Director's Decree number 25U on November 22nd, 2021. Konstantinos Stephanou has presented his academic CV. It is the following. He was born in Greece on December 24, 1988. He received the degree of Master of Arts in Social Sciences cum laude in Work and Organizational Psychology in 2016. Konstantinos Stephanou was enrolled as a doctoral student in Estonian Business School in 2016. He has worked in the field of human resource management since 2012. He started as a recruitment and personnel coordinator in Directorate of Special Forces Parachute Division in Greece. worked as an HR consultant in ITB Consulting and then project coordinator in Deutsche Post in Germany, and continued as an HR and development manager in Co-Module, Tallinn and Germany. Konstantinos Stephanou is currently working as an HR coordinator of confidential consulars in European Commission Agency, Strasbourg in France. In 2018, he was a visiting lecturer of human resource management at Estonian Business School. The dissertation of Konstantinos Stephanou is based on 7 publications from 2017, 2018, and 2020. That's all from me. Back to you, Kätlin.
And now we are ready for the presentation of the doctoral candidate. Please, the floor is yours, Konstantinos.
Thank you, Kätlin. Thank you all for being with me here. So I'll start straight with the presentation. We live in a world of constant change where the only certainty is uncertainty. The rate of change nowadays, both in terms of speed and latitude, is totally different compared to that of the past. As a result, this situation is influencing the life of the global workforce and the corporations, either directly or indirectly. Organizations confront with a new reality, and humanity witnesses a variety of different situations, such as armed conflicts, financial recession. We have also pandemic diseases, and we also witness environmental catastrophes, climate change, and natural disasters. At the same time, we encounter technological innovations, global competitions, new economic models, and digitalization. In certain areas, we witness also economic development and population growth. Meanwhile, we observe the changing nature of the workforce and the new norms which are brought at the workplace. So all those incidents disrupt lives, businesses, and economies, shaping a new reality that requires the adjustments of the organizations. In this world of volatility, organizations are striving to respond to the question, what kind of leadership styles can they adapt to confront this new reality? So, to increase the overall agility and the effectiveness, many companies have abandoned the traditional hierarchical structures with self-directed or semi-autonomous groups, following the notion of empowering management. As Thoreau notes, in time of change and complexity, individuals who acknowledge that new things can be performed and who take the initiative to implement them are mostly needed. For that reason, a large number of institutions attempt to form a continuously flattening structure by promoting autonomy and self-responsibilities and encouraging proactive acts. So, to combat ambiguity, many organizations are in a state of change through a delayering process, which transforms them from highly hierarchical into flat one. This idea stems from the notion that competent employees will be more efficient when they are directly involved in the decision-making process, without being closely monitored by multiple layers of supervisors. But how valid can this assumption be? In other words, is empowering management as pure and effective as it is perceived, or are there other parameters that should be taken into consideration when exerting this type of supervision? So, inspired from this notion, the primary aim of this research was to explore the mechanisms that empowering leadership influences performance and identify the paths that affect the relationship between those two variables. More specifically, this research tested the paths that uncertainty influences the relationship between empowering leadership and work performance, as well as the role of empathy in this association. So the present study aimed to provide solutions to a real problem that modern organizations strive to resolve, about how to guide their people in a period of constant instability and unsteadiness while maintaining the high levels of workforce performance. In this new reality, organizations are under restructure and attempt to implement a decentralized approach, whereby power is distributed among the team members. Nevertheless, it is unclear how empowered staff members will react during this period of turbulence and whether this leadership style will help them to feel more or less certain. It also remains unknown in which way emotional components, such as empathy, will affect this situation. For that reason, the model which was created was synthesized from the following variables. Firstly, we had empowering leadership. As Arnold and colleagues have outlined, employees in empowering organizations are provided with more freedom to define their work and the way to perform it. People are given the authority to arrange their own work schedule at their own convenience, and managers from their side promote these self-initiatives, encouraging their people to master their own situation. Secondly, we had uncertainty. Milliken described uncertainty in the work environment as a dubious condition, with an unpredictable outcome due to extraneous events. According to him, uncertainty is the perceived inability to foresee something precisely because of external factors. Thirdly, this research focused on the competency of empathy in order to assess to what extent superiors who hold the position of a leader are able to sense others' feelings and perspective and to take an active interest in their concern. And lastly, we had work role performance. Griffin and colleagues described the cross-classifying model of work role performance behaviors in complex and interrelated business context. This model was comprised from three sub-dimensions, namely individual task proficiency, adaptivity, and proactivity. So this research focused on discovering the true nature of empowering leadership and enlightened the ongoing debate of its controversial power based on empirical data. On the one hand, a large number of scholars championed the favorable character of this leadership approach and the benefits that it produces for employees. And on the other hand, there is another group of academicians who remain more judgmental and warn about the underlying counterproductive effects. Practitioners from their side are continuously seeking for practical answers to the leadership challenges that they encounter, particularly during this volatile period, where the only constant is change. So in concrete terms, this thesis hypothesized that empowering leadership will be a direct positive predictor of individual work role performance. At the same time, this guidance style will be an indirect negative predictor of the followers' performance by increasing their uncertainty. More specifically, empowering leadership will have a positive direct correlation with the three types of work role performance classified as individual task proficiency, adaptivity, and proactivity. This type of guidance was anticipated to have also an indirect link to performance by increasing the followers' perceived uncertainty. Yet, the application of empathy will moderate the harmful effect of empowering leadership towards uncertainty. In this respect, empowering leadership will trigger a feeling of insecurity, which will later on affect negatively the employee's performance in terms of individual task proficiency, adaptivity, and proactivity. However, the inclusion of empathy as a moderator will palliate the negative power of empowering leadership towards uncertainty and subsequently towards people's performance. So in summary, the goal of this research was to investigate how the complex interplay between empowering leadership, empathy, and uncertainty influence employees' individual performance. In line with this interactional perspective of work performance, the formulated hypothesis suggested that empowering leadership would have a more positive and a less negative relationship with employees' performance when uncertainty mediates and when empathy moderates this interplay. At the same time, when empowering supervision is perceived with a positive intent on behalf of the recipients of it, this will lead to a straight favorable connection with the way they perform. So, moving forward with the research methodology, the sample consisted of 705 professionals from various private entities and public institutions located in 6 different continents. The gender balance was relatively closely distributed, out of which around 54% was male and 46% female. 1,000 questionnaires were disseminated in a digital format, and the response rate was 70%. However, only fully completed surveys were analyzed. The majority of the respondents were between 31 and 45 years old. They had tertiary education and were positioned as staff members. The main variables that synthesized the model were 4. We had empowering leadership from Arnold and colleagues, empathy from Boyadjis and Goldman, uncertainty from Lind and Van den Bos, and work role performance from Griffin and colleagues. All variables were measured by means of self-reports with a Likert scale ranging from 1 to 5. The Cronbach alpha reliability results ranged from 0.96 to 0.64. Now, going through the analysis and the results, a variety of analysis was used as part of this research, such as confirmatory factor analysis, structure equation modeling, maximum likelihood, and Pearson correlation matrix. In order to provide evidence for the construct validity of the scales, the factorial structure of the sample was tested by performing confirmatory factor analysis with all the observed variables. In order to determine the fit of these models, specific goodness of fit statistics were taken into consideration, such as the root mean square error of approximation, the comparative fit index, the non-formed fit index, and the adjusted goodness of fit index. This process was in particular useful in order to test the differences in the models and decide which one presents a better fit. So, with the purpose of providing support for the hypothesis, a structural equation modeling with the observed variables was executed. Results indicated that the 6 tested hypotheses were confirmed, and the model revealed an excellent fit. So all the estimated parameters were significant. The findings illustrated that in this relationship, empowering leadership raised the followers over a level of individual work role performance behaviors. So in this respect, firstly, we had empowering leadership, which turned out to have a positive direct connection with individual task proficiency, individual task adaptivity, and individual task proactivity. And secondly, with the inclusion of the behavioral empathy as a moderator in the relationship between empowering leadership and uncertainty, the detrimental effect of this leadership style, both towards the mediator and the dependent variables, was unburdened. So more concretely, the inclusion of empathy as a moderator acted as a change factor, since this variable created a palliated phenomenon, both towards uncertainty and towards individual work role performance behaviors. Also, the interaction terms between empowering leadership and empathy in uncertainty were also tested. In this representation, uncertainty was plotted against empowering leadership for low and high levels of empathy. It was observed that the positive relationship was higher under higher levels of empathy. In other words, leaders who exhibited high levels of empowering leadership made their direct reports to feel less uncertain under high empathic behaviors, compared to those leaders who displayed lower levels of empowering leadership towards their followers. So, summarizing the results, the findings demonstrated that this guidance style had a positive direct effect for the 3 types of performance behaviors, And at the same time, this leadership style also produced uncertainty and exerted a negative influence towards people's performance. However, when empowering leaders displayed empathy towards their team members, they diminished the followers' sense of uncertainty, and subsequently, the latter produced a higher level of individual performance. So, moving towards the discussion and the conclusion of this thesis, starting from a theoretical perspective, this thesis is proposing thought-provoking results because, against all the research highlighting the benefits of this leadership approach, it demonstrates that this guidance style has also its drawbacks. In this respect, the previous research that investigates the dark side of empowering leadership is extended by formulating this moderated mediation model. At the same time, the findings of this thesis are also providing solutions to the drawbacks of this leadership style by discovering the alleviating power of empathy. According to the findings, empathic notion was shown to be a change factor that can palliate the negative influence that empowering leadership may exert. Now, moving towards the practical implications of the research, the present thesis alerts the organization, which are either in a delayering process or have already flattened their structure, that empowering leadership is not a panacea. Therefore, they need to be cautious about the potential deficiencies of this leadership approach. Managers and organizations who utilize such a guidance style need to be cognizant that this is a bipolar leadership style, which can yield both favorable and unfavorable conditions. Empowering leadership without empathic elements can be devastating, according to the findings of this study. For that reason, there is a need to develop this administrative style and enrich it with emotional traits such as empathy in order to be effective in this constantly changing world of instability and vagueness. So the conclusion of this dissertation argues that empowering leadership is a double-edged sword. On the one side, there is the bright and the constructive power, whereby empowering leaders have the potential to ascend their people's performance. And from the other side, there is a dark and detrimental power, as empowering leaders can also create uncertainty and descend their people's performance. Yet, the application of higher empathic notions can help the people and the empowering leaders to unburden their followers' uncertainty and increase their performance. So, closing with the limitations of this thesis, the evaluated variables were assessed by means of self-report measures, which of course may yield in socially desirable answers. And this is something that we try to tackle by guaranteeing the confidentiality of the responses. Moreover, the cross-sectional nature of the study confines the content of the variables to a snapshot instead of measuring them over time compared to a longitudinal study. Also, empowering leadership was typically measured from the follower's perspective and not also from the leader's point of view. The variations across the different managerial levels, such as the middle and top levels, were not distinguished. So this is another element that we need to take into consideration. And lastly, what has to be noted is that in this relationship between empowering guidance and the workers' reactions, this interaction may also be contingent on other factors, such as cultural values, personality type of employees, power distance, and so on. So thank you for your attention in my presentation.
Thank you for Konstantinos. And next I would like to give word to the first opponent, Professor Levente Littvay, please.
Hello. Well, thank you very much for this wonderful and very, very clear presentation. It was impressive. So thank you. I think I think this was even clearer than the writing. If I can turn this into a critical point, that's what I would say. So I believe it's a bit unfortunate that I'm the one going first here. I understand it is the convention that the external member is the person who speaks first. So because of this, well, obviously I'm a political scientist. I am not a management expert. I am asked to be here because of the technicalities of the dissertation from the methodological point of view, and it's not fun to start with technicalities. So I have prepared 3 questions. The first of which would be almost unfair, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I've prepared 3 questions that are like big picture questions for the discussion. And then I have 3 more questions that are more technical follow-ups to this. And I believe we have like roughly 25 minutes to do this. So I believe 3 plus 3 would be good. So the first question is, explain to a layperson, why is this relevant? And I'm saying this is almost unfair because you've done such a good job doing this in the presentation. But let's get the 90-second version of this. If you get stuck with, let's say, it doesn't have to be a political scientist, but a policymaker at work in the elevator for 90 seconds, and they ask you, what's your dissertation about and why is it important? What would you say? So that would be the first one. The second one is, well, how did the model, very specifically the model of this question, in the first question, contribute to our understanding of the phenomenon as opposed to what was present in the status quo? And the third question is like in the run-up to your submission of this wonderful dissertation and to this presentation, there's been some changes in that model where you have done first a major and then a minor revision. I'm more interested in the major revision, the earlier revision of the model. How did your conclusions change from what you initially thought was the appropriate way to approach this, and then what you concluded is the appropriate way to approach this? How did your conclusions about the central question change? So if I need to repeat, I have it written here so I can repeat any of these, but go ahead.
Thank you so much for your questions. I have taken notes, but I will also echo your what you stated, just to be clear that we have a common understanding. First of all, starting about the relevance of the topic. So if I were in an elevator and I had to explain the topic in 90 seconds to a person, perhaps it would take me a bit more, but in short, I'm trying to be always very pragmatic, echoing what Steve Jobs was telling, that we hire experts to tell us what to do and not to tell them what they have to do. So our world is changing rapidly. We see that right now we have a dissertation online, something that it was not common in the past. So organizations need to adapt to this new reality, and they don't have the time and the luxury to freeze, make the change, unfreeze, and continue. So we do observe that there is a constant need of making the people accountable for their actions, not micromanaging them, and letting them know that, hey, you have the power to lead this task to an end. I count on you. I trust you. This is why you are here. And I believe that you will bring an added value for me because you will bring something new. So first of all, this was the main thing that triggered my attention. And I say that because I come from an area that we constantly try to evolve leadership's capabilities and managers' capabilities in this constantly evolving world. However, we don't know if performance will follow this leadership notion. And the question is, will always be equally effective under this guidance style? Or are there other parameters that can affect the way they perform? And this basically goes to your second question, which asks about how does this model help the understanding of the theoretical framework that exists outside in the literature and contributes to the status quo that it exists. So there is a big academic debate, which is very controversial. There is a large part of academicians who are very fond of this leadership style. And if you go out there in the managers area, they will always tell you about empowering types of leadership guidance. Let's empower our people. Let's use empowerment. We trust our people. But if you ask the people, many times they will tell you, "Oh, this is not always good for me." You'll observe, and this is something that has been observed also in researches which have been done, that there is a tendency for some people, based on different factors, that this triggers the sense of insecurity, of instability. They start thinking, maybe my manager does not know how to do the work, and puts his or her responsibility on my shoulders. Or why should I do that? This is not what I'm paid for. So this study aimed to enlighten this debate and try to show which of those two types of, let's say, approaches is valid, and try to contribute to this ongoing debate. But apart from that, we went a step further. And this study went a step further in the terms of trying to identify which is the element that can enhance, improve this leadership style from being negative to being less negative towards being positive. And this was this emotional element, which is called empathy. Right now, what we observe is that the empowering notion is a notion which basically states that, hey, I have the power, which I'm delegating to you because I can and I trust you, and I expect from you to deliver this task because I have assigned that to you. Nevertheless, this is not always the case. And as we see according to the findings, some people perceive that in a very positive manner. So they had the feeling that, hey, I'm entrusted by my manager. The manager counts on me. I'm able to contribute. I'm able to make the step further. And I'm able to add value to my organization. Whereas another part of the population started to say, why is this happening to me? This is not what my job description says. Or why do I have to make this extra mile? Is my manager incompetent of doing that? Is he doing that deliberately because he or she has many tasks and now this individual puts more things on my shoulders? So this thing started triggering questions. Okay, that's the situation. We observe this bipolar effect. What can we do to help those people who feel the sense of uncertainty? And we realized that empathy was alleviating this person's sense of uncertainty. And this goes to your third question that you asked about the revision of the thesis on the first part, and turning from when the major revisions were introduced. And I have to say that I'm thankful for that, because some elements were spotted in this part which helped me to introduce them and make the dissertation an even better result, an even better output. Now, to be more, do I have time or you want to add something? Okay. So jumping on your third question, the conclusions of the dissertation did not change significantly. What changed was to clarify the model even further. And to be more specific in that, if we go to the slide number 38, where we investigated the interaction between empowering leadership and empathy in uncertainty, what we observed is that leaders who exhibited high levels of empowering leadership made their direct reports to feel less uncertain under high empathic behaviors, compared to those leaders who displayed the lower levels of empowering leadership towards their followers. So, to put it in simple terms, is that this analysis between those two variables assess the influence and the relationship between those two, between the data. And what we realized through these slopes is that the positive relationship was higher under higher levels of empathy. So in other words, the leaders who displayed the high levels of empowering leadership made their direct reports to feel less uncertain when they were exhibiting high levels of empathic behaviors, compared to the leaders who were displaying lower levels of empowering leadership towards their followers. And actually, this helped, as you had pointed out, I believe, to identify the strength of the impact of this moderator. And this was the enlightening fact. And thank you for that. So basically, this concludes my answers. I hope they are clear. If not, I'm happy to contribute further.
They certainly are. So let's turn to the technical question. So one of the one of my main lingering concerns about this this model that you presented is its treatment of the missing data. You pointed out even in the presentation that you have only incorporated completed responses, fully completed responses, and I don't know why you did that. I mean, structural equation models are fully capable of dealing with sporadic item level missing data, and my understanding is that if anybody had any missing data, you just excluded them, which, based on my reading, is going to hurt your statistical power. It's going to even hurt your model in terms of the assumptions that are required about these missing data. And you write somewhere in the dissertation that the missing data is just random non-response items, but you don't know that. You never tested that. I mean, it might just be sporadically looking non-response items, but that randomness cannot be tested, and your results are not unbiased unless it is truly random. So I don't think there's a good answer to the question of why didn't you do it? Why didn't you incorporate all observed information with some kind of full information estimation? But I'm going to throw it out there anyway. Also, any guesses as to what impact this missingness, this non-response has on your results is one. So that's question number one for the technical. The second one, I see this in the literature a lot, so it's not like you are deviating from the general practice, but it still bothers me in the whole literature, not just with you, is that I see people do factor analyses of these multiple item indicators that they have, which was the case with you as well. You very much presented these, and then you even done confirmatory factor analysis of these to test its quality, and then you ended up just averaging them and putting them into a path model. Whereas to me, the logical step was to take that confirmatory factor analysis and turn it into a full structural model where the latent variables are related to each other. So I'm just puzzled why you didn't go that route. I think it would have allowed you to build a more reliable model and to flush out the measurement error more effectively in your variables. And finally, I think the criteria that you used for evaluating your models, especially comparing your models, have been, I'd say I felt it was shaky all along the process. So maybe there's a good time to reiterate. This is a good time to reiterate when you compared models, based on what criteria did you decide that this model is better than that model, therefore I will go with this. And why do you think that's the right criteria? You're lucky this doesn't have a correct answer. I just want to hear your rationale and reasoning. So these are the three questions. Again, I have them right here. I'm happy to repeat them, but let's dig into the technicalities, because that's why I'm here. So
thank you for those technical questions. Indeed, I mean, there's no, let's say, perfect research. I will start with the missing data. I have a backup slide for that. So if Marco could go to slide 54, then 55. So I'll start answering from this question. First of all, there was a big debate between myself and my supervisors about the missing values. And just to let you know, the background of the story is that from an ethical perspective, and this was the right thing to do, we did not deliberately request from the people to answer all the questions, which had a significant consequence. So we had to bear the consequences here. And this was pointed out from my supervisor, that we should not force, meaning that the people were filling in the survey in a digital format, so we could lock the items and not let the people to move on to the next question if they had not answered the previous one, which is something that I see very frequently. I take part in dissertations, in researches, and they force you to answer, which has another type of consequences. As you see in this, let's talk about the consequences in my dissertation, which this decision had. We observe the pattern and take into consideration that empathy does not succeed uncertainty in the sequence. We see the pattern that the subjects tended to, let's say, respond less as the time was going by. Okay, this can be due to, let's say, I don't know, boredom, due to, let's say, they were tired, so they started to not to respond so much. Okay, and this resulted in having, missing values, which when we saw the results, we said, okay, let's identify which of the statements are full, so we are going with them. Of course, there was the possibility to say that, you need to fill in the entire questionnaire, no matter what. But this would be not entirely in line with the ethical notion, in the sense of all the data subjects had to be treated equally. So some people may not want to respond. And here we need also to see the practical side. Practical side, what is it? As a practitioner, I can tell you that looking at the psychology of the participants who are participating in surveys, and they need to evaluate their superior, people are very reluctant. Why? Imagine that your salary or your evaluation, your annual performance appraisal, may be affected on that. So the supervisor may say, oh, I'm negatively assessed. This came from this person. Of course, we were not sharing any data with the people or the organizations in terms of who answered why. This was clarified in the message when we were informing the people. But always, and I know that because I'm discussing with the participants, they always have this thing in the back of their mind. And this was another reason why you had raised also the point in your review, why you didn't investigate the cultural patterns and so forth and so on. And in the demographics, when we did the pre-test, people started saying, why do you ask where I come from? You can identify, who am I? So they started raising that kind of questions, and we said, okay, we have to exclude those elements. So in short, there is not a golden answer, but to put it, let's say in summary, my answer to your first question, we try to, let's say, balance between the pros and the cons, taking into consideration, the ethical parameters, and also knowing that the people had to respond about the delicate issue to assess and evaluate how their superior performs. Now, moving towards the second question about the confirmatory factor analysis, I have to say, in a humble way, that that this is something. All of the researches which have been conducted and the publications which we have done with my supervisor and other people, we always rely on confirmatory factor analysis, because if you see the literature and also if you see the scientific elements outside, this is not always the case. So people don't always case the factorial structure of the measures they are using. And if we go to the slide of 31, which shows the confirmatory factor analysis, this helped us to identify which model would be used. Now, I will go deeper into the technicalities here, because you raise a valid point. Okay, how did you choose this model compared to the other? And you also very rightfully observed that in some areas the differences between the indicators were not so big. Okay, so I'll start with the individual work role performance. First, both structures presented in this case an excellent fit, a very good fit, based on the indexes. What we thought is that, and also based on your feedback, is that it would be more intriguing to adapt the three-factor model. Why? Because later on, when the people will go into practice, they could more easily identify which behavior stems from individual task adaptivity, which behavior stems from individual task proactivity, and which behaviors stem from individual task proficiency. And let's be a little bit pragmatic here. Let's say bridging this gap, the theoretical gap, with practitioners' field. When people are assessed, let's say in a 360 feedback assessment survey, we need to be very clear about the behaviors that they exhibit. And when we coach them, we can say these behaviors belong to the part of the proficiency. So you know very good about the things which belong to your subject matter expertise. The second element, which we want to develop, because you lack, for example, is the things which have to do with adaptivity, because you don't seem to adapt to this new reality, and you tend to adapt models, let's say preach and champion models, which used to be, let's say, efficient in the past and productive, but not anymore. So you don't cope with the new demands which our reality has. And the third element is being proactive. So the model of Griffin and colleagues champions that it's not enough to be adaptive, to adapt to a new reality, but you need to learn from this new reality and predict the future before it happens. So this means to be proactive. So that's why we said it would be better to adapt for this model, the three-factor model. Now, when it comes to the empowering leadership, over there, this was the independent variable. Over there, it was vice versa. We try to keep things simple. Of course, you again rightfully say that, hey, look at your results. They are very close. And by the way, the one-factor model is slightly better. Yes, you're right. But we said, let's make the model not so overcomplicated. We can do that, but in order to explain that, it would be a much more complex process, and to explain where the independent variable comes from. So we focused on the dependent variable much more. And the last element was, the Harman's factor thing that we did, where basically, okay, over there, we put all the variables, in order to identify whether there is a common pattern, because people had to fill in the questionnaire in one sequence. So over there, we tried to see the factorial structure of all the variables and whether they were all distinct. So empowering leadership items were loaded in the empowering leadership scale. The uncertainty items were loaded to the uncertain scale, and so forth and so on, in order to be sure that these were distinct variables and we didn't have any bias or any effect because the people had to fill in the whole questionnaire in one go. So this is the overall picture. I try to, in my answer, to sort of marry and combine the scientific restriction with the practical restrictions. Why? Because I always have in mind that the research has a value as long as it has a practical application for the people and it brings an impact to their lives. So I take into consideration that this tomorrow will be also, hopefully, used by practitioners. So a guy from a management position will sit down and say, okay, what does this new research say? How can I apply it to my work? And how can I, as a researcher and a practitioner, I can make this knowledge as plain as possible for him or her, which tomorrow will hopefully want to use it. So yeah, that's it. I hope I tackled.
Well, let me follow this up, because on the first question, on the missing data part of the question, I think we're talking a little bit past each other, because what I am mostly interested in is analytically, not from a data collection point of view, because I actually fully agree with the data collection decisions. I have those debates about ethics and forced responses all the time myself, and I usually try to put the foot down. And I'm fully with you that we shouldn't force people to respond to surveys with collaborators. So I'm fully with you, but analytically, inside the structural equation model, you had better options. And it's called full information maximum likelihood, where you can incorporate incompletely observed individuals. So not the people who didn't respond to any of your questions, but the people who responded to some of your questions. They could have been incorporated, and you would receive more unbiased results if you do that, and the tools you were using are fully capable of doing that. Again, I don't think there's a good answer to why you didn't do it, but I would consider this as you move forward with this research. So instead of deleting everybody who had any missing information, which is what you did, my understanding is what you did, use this full information estimation, and it will serve you much better in the analysis. And once again, with the second question as well, you did such extensive and great work with confirmatory factor analysis that is very heavily absent in the literature. In fact, people should be doing what you did, but you didn't take the last final step that you should be taking, which is take those factor models and build your structural model based on those latent variables. Rather, you took a step back, you averaged the indicators of what you wanted to do, and then just built a path model. So in future research, I would like to push you in that direction. That's actually not an easy process. I've done it myself. It's very frustrating. I understand why people revert back to this, but it leads to better research and better results. So I just want to push you that I think what you've done was an excellent job, but you can go further and you can do even better.
Thank you for these remarks and for pushing me to do better things. A last comment that I forgot to mention is that in the past we had used, in the researches we had conducted, the analysis that you proposed, meaning that to take into consideration the not the fully completed questionnaires. In this case, we decided not to do that. It was a conscious decision in order to have fully completed responses. It has its pros and cons, and I acknowledge what you said, as well as I definitely recognize what you mentioned about the confirmatory factor analysis and the last step, which has to be taken no matter how difficult it is.
Yeah, what are the pros? I'm just curious. What went into that decision? So you said,
I can tell you what is the pros. Of course, that's subjective and debatable. Okay, I sit down and I basically take into consideration the people who completed everything, and and I will tell you why. If some, let's say, subscales or things were not completed, this will not affect the final result. So sometimes I'll tell you the practical perspective, because I very much use this in these 360 feedback surveys that we do in management field. Over there, we also use the top 3 boxes analysis and so forth and so on. But sometimes we sit down and say, okay, some people did not know what to answer. Let's exclude them because perhaps they don't have the full picture. They lack this information, or they don't want to answer that. So I had this in mind and I said, let's keep the people who answer from A to Z. And that's perhaps my own bias. Okay, I can recognize that I said, okay, let's focus into that area. Personally, I'm a bit hesitant, although I have used in the past the approach that you mentioned. And I say hesitant because the approach meaning that to have questionnaires which are not fully completed, okay, to be more specific. because I don't always consider them as giving me the full picture. And you know that in statistics, there are three kinds of lies, lies, dim lies, and statistics. We always need to take into consideration that this is an angle that we see. We also need to go and talk with the people, say, is it like that? It's like you see a picture in your reality, but you see it from a particular angle. You don't see the full thing. So we have to be also cautious. So I tried to say, and I said, okay, let's use the participants' responses, which are fully completed, hoping that we will get a more clear picture on that. So that's the notion. Of course, the cons on that is what you also mentioned, is that this may not make the results not so robust, or we miss the element which could improve even better the results. So that's the pros and cons that have to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, well, I thank you. It was a very good answer. It was a very good answer to the question I asked of what do you think is the impact of the missing data as well. So it was a very good answer for that as well, to some extent. I thank you for your responses. Once again, I want to congratulate you for a very, very good work done, and something you can truly be proud of, and nobody can take this away from you. So thank you.
Thank you also for your kind words. They are encouraging, and as well as for taking the time to read my research and make valid comments, which help me indeed to make a better work. And I don't say that just to say it, but some things that you mentioned to me all the way from the very beginning helped me to make this work a better outcome, with its pros and cons, of course. Absolutely agree.
Well, I'm glad if that was the case. Thank you.
It was, certainly. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Littvay. And next I would like to give the word to Professor Kurmet Kivipõld from Tartu University. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you, Konstantinos, for a nice presentation. My compliments for that. It was really, really good and joinable. And I was very glad to read your work. Of course, I have used to read much shorter versions, but anyway, it was very interesting. Maybe I start debate from the theoretical part, and maybe in such way that I giving the question, you can give answers, and I giving the next question such way. And first of all, I would like to I read your work from your work that you have there. You compared also not only empowering leadership, but also authentic and transformational leadership there. And maybe I didn't catch. I was a little bit missing these synthesis between them. What is similarities and what is difference? Maybe my question will be such way that I concentrate on difference. If we are talking all this different type of leadership, they are making influence to followers. And my question is, what is this mechanism of influence of these three types of leadership? How we get the power to influence the people in transformational, authentic leadership and empowering leadership?
So thank you for your question. So First of all, like the research participants had to answer about basically to assess their supervisor based on the empowering leadership scale, the questionnaire from Arnold, and basically this was a shortened version, which was also a standardized version, which has been used in many publications in order to help the participants to not to lose a lot of time. So we did not investigate transformational leadership styles. What was done, also based on your comments in the review, and I'm thankful for that, was to compare and set some elements about how empowering leadership differs from other guidance styles, such as authentic, transformational, and participative leadership, or other types of leadership, or servant leadership. And basically, what was shown there is that empowering type of guidance is a distinct style, which is used right now in the organizations. And I say distinct because it differs from from the other type of guidance styles, because it gives, as it was outlined in the thesis, it gives the responsibility and part of the responsibility to the subjects to bring a task to an end. So this is a distinct type of guidance where this research was focused. What we also acknowledge is that indeed there are other guidance styles which are out there. And as a matter of fact, when it comes to transformational leadership, this is something that was identified in the limitations. We have to see how other leadership styles may use elements of empowering leadership and how that differs. But since we want to have something very focused about this leadership style, because this is something that organizations are putting the focus on, if they are in this delayering process, therefore we put our focus there. I want to make a differentiation between the past and the present, in particular when it comes to transformational leadership. Transformation in the past, in the researches that I have conducted together with my supervisor and other scholars, we had focused in other type of guidance, such as transactional type of guidance, for instance, in the military. There are particular contexts that a leadership style can be effective. So what we have seen based on our past researches and other research is that depending on the task, and for instance, in areas where it's like high reliability organization, we need to have more directive leadership styles, like transactional leadership styles. Then after that, the past decade and 2 decades, everything was about transformational leaders, okay? People who had the vision, they could make a better change, they were the visionaries and everyone was following, okay? But this is not the case anymore, because leaders are not the experts. They have lots of experts below them that they need to listen. And this is why I raised the saying from Steve Jobs, who said, we don't have experts, so we tell them what to do, but they tell us what we should do. And this is where it goes to follow empowering guidance styles, where basically over there, leaders delegate a part of the authority to their people in order to complete and bring a task to an end. So these are things which we took into consideration, and we focused in this leadership style, of course, mentioning also in the limitations how other leadership approach could affect that, and how future research could be when we create such models.
Thank you for your answer. But anyway, I ask not from empirical part this, but theoretical part. It's a theoretical issue. And we know that central element in leadership is power. How we can get this power to influence the people. What create this power from, for example, empowering leadership? What creates how leader get this power to influence the people. This is different from empowering leadership, authentic leadership, and transformational leadership.
So you refer to the mechanisms that empowering leadership affects the people. Is my understanding correct?
Yeah, how these get, for example, I can tell you that if we're talking about authentic leadership, authentic leaders through these factors, behaviors, he or she getting power through the trust, people trusting him or her, and then he or her can influence the people. And if we're taking the transformational leadership, their leaders give possibility to develop the people, change them. And this is a motivates and developing is how this leader get the power to influence the people. What is such kind of mechanism in empowering leadership? Because it's your specialty.
Thank you for this question. So in empowering leadership, we have a manager, a supervisor, who first of all, aside from the theoretical part, the mechanism of that is that he or she needs to devolve part of his power to his people or her people. This practically means is that a task which is assigned to another person, the person is held accountable for that, responsible for that, because the manager is completely accountable for that. Over there, the mechanism functions in the following way. The recipient of this leadership style sits down and says, "Oh, look, my manager entrusts me and puts something which is beyond my job description, because beyond what we say in my task performance." And we move to that what we call contextual performance, which are things which are beyond my job description, beyond the things that I need to do, beyond my job profile. Over there, the person says, "Look, I am empowered to bring an added value to my place of work, to help my people to become better. And I have this trust from my superior." So this makes the people to be more eager to make a change and do the extra mile in the way they perform. However, sometimes empowering leadership by giving this autonomy is not helpful. So this autonomy from some people is perceived in a different way. So another part of the people says, my manager gives me more autonomy, delegates the authority to me. Why should I do that? Why my manager gives me more responsibility in things that potentially he or she should do? Why should I do that? I don't want to do the extra mile. I just came to perform a task and that's it. I don't want to go beyond that. So this creates a sense of ambiguity to the person who sits down and says, look, I'm thoughtful here. There is something that does not go well, or I don't want to do that. And this, as a subsequent consequence, affect the way the person perform. And this is this bipolar nature which was acknowledged. And as Sharma and Kirkman have pointed out, it remains unclear why, how, and when empowering leadership approach can be beneficial or not towards the people and the recipients. And over there, I have given particular emphasis in the theoretical analysis when it comes to different types of organizations. For example, startups and organizations which are newly created turn to have more and adapt more empowering guidance approach. Why? Because over there is a flat hierarchy, a matrix hierarchy. We also see that in other organizations like Zalando, in Silicon Valley, where we say, look, you need to bring a task to an end, and I give you this possibility because I'm not the expert there, and I want to count on your expertise. And this is an element of difference if we compare it with transformational leadership, where transformational leader, over there, we had people who said, this is me, I try to evolve you, become better, but, hey guys, everyone needs to follow me. I'm the visionary, and I'm the guy who, makes the change, and I'm here to evolve you. But the empowering management says, look, I count on you, and I give you the autonomy to bring this task to an end, to fulfill something which may not be part of your role, your official role, but I believe you can contribute in that and help our organization to be better, to perform better. So this is how I would describe the mechanisms that empowering leadership functions, and also why organizations find a value in that. Because right now, managers and leaders don't have the time to, let's say, show to the people how to do something, A, because sometimes they don't know, and B, because they trust that their people can do this work, and some parts of their work potentially even better than what they would do. That's why we talk about the expertise. Experts are trusted, and they are enabled by being delegated a sense of power, as you pointed out.
Thank you. But anyway, I don't know. Will you agree with me if I telling that main mechanism to getting of course there is a many mechanisms, but the main mechanism to getting the power to influence the people coming from from employees' involvement. You involve the people, and they get you share the decision making with them, and from there coming. Okay, it's my point of view, and of course I would like to move on and clarify one thing. I read, and also you in your presentation you said, and I find different things if you're talking about phenomenon of empathy. Some places you name it trait, and also in presentation you call it trait. Some places skill. Some places even can find the attitude. Let's clear finally. What is empathy? Is it trait, skill, or attitude? Sorry, I can't hear.
Yes. So can you hear me?
Yeah, no. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, you have a point here in terms of the terminology which is used about empathy. So, as it was mentioned, both in the presentation and in the research, in the thesis, so empathy is an emotional intelligence competency, as it has been identified from Boyadjiz and Goldman. In other words, this means whether leaders are able to get in tune with others by understanding and perceiving their emotions. In some parts of the research, yes, I used the term of trait. I did that basically for practical elements in order to not to use all the time the same terminology. In essence, as I clearly wrote, this research focused on this competency of empathy because we also used, and this was the scale that was used, about the emotional intelligence competencies, which are crucial for leading and managing others. And this was the scale from Boyadjiz and Goldman.
Okay, thank you. And now you bring third thing, what is competency and how is skill and competency linked? Because of course we can see competency, skill, attitudes. So we can see in one set, but trait is not including in this set at all. And of course, if we're talking about the terminology, always it's very wise to keep same terminology in one paper. And what do you think? What is how these competences and skill is connected?
So. About competencies, there is a large debate, and actually this is an area of my expertise in my work. But in short, do you hear me? Okay. So competencies are all the knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics that a person needs to perform his or her role. Okay. These also can include, according to various terms, various definitions, behaviors and attitudes. In this dissertation, in this research, as mentioned, we have adapted, and I used the term and the definition given by Boyadzis and Goldman, who in simple terms describe the competency as the capability, the ability, and the ability to what? To sit down, listen carefully, and understand the people's point of view, which may also be different due to the background. And here I have to point out that we also used reversed items, which helped us to even increase the reliability of the scale in order to be sure that what we measure is what we mean, and we have a good understanding from the participants' perspective.
Okay, thank you very much for your explanation. And from this, my suggestion was just use only two types these notions as competencies and behavior. It would be sufficient to use this. Yeah, because this is more correctly. Okay, let's move to other thing. And the next question will be something link between theoretical and empirical part. And I would like to ask, what do you think, how different industries associate with level of distribution of decision making in organization? Because you said that you have different type of organization in empirical part, and uncertainty from environment, because companies are different industries. Are the industries similar? And are the organization in industries similar? Because it wasn't in your data, because you're collecting data and you was able to also mentioned or marked the industries and also the organizations, how big they are, because size of organization in this research is quite important.
Absolutely. And actually, this is something that it's being discussed in the dissertation. So you raise a valid point that different industries have a different level of distribution of power, and also uncertainty varies. First of all, to say about the choice which was made, and this is also explained in the dissertation, that I did not want to investigate a particular industry as I had done in the past with the researches we have conducted, also with my supervisor in the area of high reliability organization like nuclear power plants or military aviation, because then the results would be applicable only to specific segments. So we opened up the research to many organizations. As you rightfully point out, different industries have a different level of uncertainty and different level of power distribution. What we saw, starting from the theoretical part, is that in previous researches, organizations which are in strict environments like military aviation or let's say power chemical organizations are more strict. They don't devolve the power. They don't give the possibility to the people to be creative, to improvise. Why? Because in case there is a mishap, something wrong in the decision-making process, then the outcome of this situation can be fatal. Can be fatal in terms of people losing their lives, in terms of damaging very expensive equipment, in terms of creating accident with unprecedented consequences. Then there are other industries, like, as mentioned previously, startup organizations, newborn organizations. There are also organizations which are in the field of, let's say, management, logistics, which are evolving. They observe that it's not feasible anymore to use authoritative or directive leadership styles anymore. Why? Because we live in a constantly changing world, as it was initially described, and we live in a world of experts, where everyone or almost everyone carries an expertise with him or her. So this makes them to turn towards a more empowering, let's say, democratic way of leading their people, where they say, okay, I'm not the full authority, so I'm giving the possibility to you, to my people, to lead and complete a task autonomously in a self-directed manner. Over there, uncertainty varies, and this is why we used, and I particularly mentioned in the presentation, the definition of Milliken, who described uncertainty in the work environment and not in general any environment. Because over there, uncertainty is described into three types: the environmental uncertainty, the effect of the uncertainty, and the inability to foresee the nature of the impact, and the response towards the uncertainty, which is something that the person lives in at work, okay, and not in general in life. And this is because, as you mentioned, uncertainty can vary based on the industry and based also on the size of the organization. So to put it all in one, in summary, is that there was the pros and cons, the advantage of the disadvantage of this decision. This research aimed to have a global effect, so to be able to the outcome and the findings of it to be applied in various types of organization. That's why it wasn't considered one specific segment, one specific industry. Of course, what is proposed as part of the future research is that people in specific areas where they are, let's say, specialized, they can use and test whether this assumption is applicable in their case, taking into account what we mentioned previously, that not in all industries empowering leadership is working as effectively as possible. And the last part that I want to point out is that in the discussion part, where we say, and I quote the pros and cons of empowering leadership, it's mentioned very clearly that in some areas, empowering leadership can be deficient, and it cannot be as effective as directive leadership styles. Why? In critical conditions, what has been observed based on literature, you don't have the time to empower the people. You say, look, we are in a critical situation, the house is burning, we need to take this decision, go and do it. So it's instruction, order, and reaction from the recipient of this leadership approach. Empowering approaches have been found to have beneficial outcomes when the task is not so critical. So people have the possibility to learn, have the possibility to experiment themselves, have the possibility to even do a mistake, okay? So over there, in long-term situations, the persons were found to perform much better than their counterparts who were, let's say, under directive leadership approaches. But of course, what we see is that the task differs and the level of uncertainty differ. And that's something we need to take into consideration when we exert this leadership style.
Yes, thank you. But anyway, this was my critics that you not bring out these descriptive statistics which shows this variety of your sample. And it would nice to see this, how it is, because from these might be also bias from your research might come. Okay, but let's move on. I can see that our time is limited. I have only 2 questions more for you, and hopefully they will be quite short answers. And first question is, you made the correlation between variables, and this is in your work table 8, and the main idea from your theoretical part is that empowering leadership, increasing uncertainty. But if we're looking for this correlation, we can see that this correlation figure is minus 0.3, which is a not strong correlation, but still is correlation, and it's a minus, which means that when stronger coming empowerment leadership behavior, then lower coming uncertainty. But all the work talking oppositely. Can you explain this phenomenon to me? Why it's so?
So if Marco goes to slide 49, it's the figure that you mentioned, just to confirm that we have the same visual representation. So among the predictors, almost all intercorrelation coefficients were statistically significant at the level of 0.01 level, correct? So the coefficients refer to the linear relationship that connect the 2 or more variables. So according to the table, uncertainty correlated negatively at the low and moderate level with all the rest of the variables. That shows that the structure equation model is even stronger. So this basically backs up the result that we have identified through the structure equation model. And it's an additional element that provides validity and reliability to the results. I don't know if you can still hear me, but in short, what I point out in the answer is that the fact that the structure equation model shows a significant relationship where the correlation is low.
Yeah, and it also shows that that when leader behave more empowering behavior, then uncertainty should go down, because it's a oppositely, one coming up, other going down. Okay, we can move on because our time is also limited, and I have final question from practical point of view. If you could please put in presentation you had not last slide, but it's a slide which is in work in figure 11. That was nice slide. Figure, yeah.
Sorry, could you please say again which slide do you mean? What is the title?
It was this moderation slide.
Okay, so most likely you refer to slide number 21?
Show me, then I can see.
Marco is looking for it, or 33, something like that, the path model. As Marco is looking for that, just to clarify on what you mentioned previously, is that the negative correlation is almost zero. This means that in the graphical representation, that the relationship is constant. So this means that the more empowering leadership people are exhibited, the more people feel the sense of uncertainty. That's why we showed the bipolar effect. Do you mean this diagram?
No.
Okay.
It's a moderation slide where is all three variables.
All three variables. The interaction, number 38,
yes.
Perhaps? Okay. Interaction between empowering leadership. Yeah. So it's slide number 38, Marco. This one?
Yeah, this one, yes. Thank you. And my question is such kind of practical, managerial practice. If you have such kind activity that you need low empowering leadership, what is your suggestion for this leader about the empathy?
If we had a task that requires low empowering leadership, what would be my suggestion for empathy?
Yes, for this leader. Of course, this need low empowering leadership, more this transactional way leadership, and low empowering leadership, and about the empathy. What is your suggestion for this? If you need to give a suggestion to this leader, be more empathic or low empathic?
First of all, before giving any suggestion, I would look into the task. Okay, what is the nature of the task? What is the sense of urgency? That was also highlighted in the discussion section. And also, who are the recipients of this leadership approach? Then this would help me to understand, what's the situation, the context, the contextual situation. Now, when it comes to empathy, I would still encourage the manager to use the empathic competency for a simple reason. If it's a task of low urgency, then the manager in long term can understand the people better. So the way that they need to be guided, okay, and help them to help him or her, the manager, to adapt the right leadership approach. If it's a high sense of uncertainty with this very high critical task, which can have detrimental effects if it's not performed, then I would encourage the leader to not to be so empathic and move straight with a direct leadership approach in order to complete the task. That would be my suggestion.
Okay. And basically this figure showing this, that if you have such kind of task which need low empowering leadership, then to decrease uncertainty, you need lower empathy also.
The figure shows the following thing. Shows the relationship between empowering leadership and uncertainty, which was positive under both high and low levels of empathy. Nonetheless, the effect of this association differed depending on the strength of empathy. So as you can see, the slopes are not in parallel, but they are crossing each other.
Yeah,
So the positive relationship was higher under high levels of empathy. This means, in simple terms, that leaders who displayed high levels of empowering leadership made their direct reports to feel less uncertain under high empathic behaviors compared to those leaders who displayed lower levels of empowering leadership towards their followers.
But my question was not in this part, it was in other part. Okay. Thank you, Konstantinos. It was quite interesting debate for me, and I joined this, and I haven't any more questions and comments because our time is over. And I thank you very much. It was really interesting work and valuable reading. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Konstantinos. Thank you, Kurmet. I would like to exercise my right to ask also some questions, and my questions, let's say, move even more abstract level compared to Kurmet, more away from the tiny technicalities, but kind of the overall pictures. But anyhow, I would like to start where Kurmet actually ended, and it's the role of empathy and also maybe the managerial approach to empathy. Don't you think that, based on your research and maybe kind of as you recommended that you also maybe more profoundly introduced to, for example, MBA students, that empathy as a kind of humanistic approach will be turned instrumentalistic kind of manipulation tool?
So the value of every knowledge depends on its usage. So we produce science in order to help the people, but there are many people who may use the scientific results on the opposite way. For instance, sometimes in marketing, people use the findings of psychological surveys in a way to manipulate the consumers. I don't have anything negative against the marketeers, but I'm just pointing out that we can have every knowledge, but it depends on us how we use it. Now, about the type of empathy and the level of empathy that is distributed, in essence, this competency helps the managers to understand the perspectives of the others, even if they differ from the one that they possess. And this is something which is more critical than ever because we live in a diverse world and many organizations are constantly starting to become more global and global. And even if the workforce is not multinational, it's highly likely that they interact with people from other countries. Not always, okay, but many times. Let's say here we have a university which has many international students, or we will have many people, practitioners, who will read this research from different areas. So when a manager has the possibility to understand others by putting himself or herself into the other's shoes, has instantly the possibility to treat them in a way which will be more efficient in the way they perform. Of course, the manager can misuse this element, but it's up to him or her to use it in the proper way, as we do it in our everyday life. I mean, we have plenty of tools in our possessions, but it's up to us to use them in a friendly way, in a beneficial way towards others.
So basically, if to if to answer to Kurmet's previous question again, then we can also say that regarding or disregard the level of uncertainty and the level of empowerment, we actually, or the organization can anyhow benefit from having empathic leaders.
Empathy has been, as it was also outlined in the dissertation, has been shown as a critical factor combined with other types of guidance. So that's why it's more and more introduced in leadership approaches. So that is why we also investigated that in this type of leadership style. Of course, as I pointed out, we always need to be skeptical, take into consideration what is the nature of the task, what is the sense of urgency, which are the people that they are guided, and which is the environment that this leadership style is approached. I will refer back to the example that I gave with the high reliability organizations, which have, let's say, nuclear power plants, or let's say military aviation. Over them, they don't have always the luxury to be empathic with the leadership style that they adopt. They need to be more directive in order to make sure that their followers will perform in a specific manner. And if something goes wrong, then the level of fatality or the level of danger is much more significant. So over there is a more stimulus response approach.
Empowering. I mean,
Sorry?
you know, do you think it's related more to empathy or empowering? I mean, if you are running the nuclear plant, then you can't be emphatic, or you're just not able to be so empowering. I mean, the empathy
it
and
doesn't
empowering are not exactly the same things, yes? I can
They
be
are distinct.
autocratic, but I can still be empathic to others.
Yes, someone can be autocratic and be empathic to others, but what would be the value of someone who is autocratic to be empathic?
So it only goes with the empowering leadership style to be empathic then, yeah?
Not necessarily. What I try to point out here is that a directive leader does not necessarily need to have an empathic notion, because a directive leader is a guy who basically says that you do that and the guy performs it, and that's how it's a clear structure with a clear outcome that has to be performed. Whereas an empowering leader says, I'm counting on you, I'm delegating this task to you, do it in an autonomous way, I'm not going to micromanage you, so I trust that you will perform it. So usually a directive manager would not even, let's say, care, or would not even go into the situation to go into the shoes of the other person, because he or she wouldn't need it necessarily. That's why I think that it would not be necessarily beneficial. Of course, that can be also investigated further.
Okay, thank you. My other question is, so kind of inquiries about the volatility and uncertainty of the environment. As you mentioned many times that the only certain things is change, and we are living in the kind of environment where there is ongoing constant change, and organizations need to somehow deal with that. In the way how you see how organizations deal with this ongoing change? Because you also mentioned that there is no possibility to follow this somehow questionable Levin's model, or basically it's questioned this Levin's model, but this unfreeze, change, refreeze, that there is no time for that. But how, in your view, organizations actually need to deal with volatility, uncertainty, and ongoing change?
I believe it's a fundamental question, because some organizations don't even want to deal with uncertainty, or disregard it, or think that it's a trivial thing. And we have seen that with practical examples. Look what happened to Nokia, who could not cope with the constantly changing world, and then it collapsed. Or other kind of industries who also were shrinked because other types of organization came up. And here I can give some very practical examples. Okay, let's think which is the biggest hotel in the world, which does not have any possession? It's Airbnb. Which is the biggest taxi industry in the world, which does not have any possession? It's Taxify, or it's Uber. So what I want to point out is that over there, we see that some organizations were able to change, to evolve, to create something new, whereas others stay to doing things in the old-fashioned way. I always say that, it's the alibi of the past. I used to do something. It used to work 10 years ago. I will do it now. But look what happened. Many hotels have closed, many taxi industries closed, or they do not go as well, as efficient as in the past. Dealing with uncertainty is a choice. I also elaborated the part in the thesis from Gudela Crote from ETH, who says that people have different types of mechanisms in dealing with uncertainty. Some people suppress it. Some people say, I'm going to minimize that. Some people try to say that I'm going to find some certainty in other things, okay, in finding new information in order to cover my uncertainty. Some others disregard it, say it's going to pass. And some others embrace it, say, look, we are in a new world, let's change the way we lead. And this is where, my research comes in. Empowering leadership is a relatively new style, which is not necessarily embraced. Many people talk about that, but how many people actually perform it in reality? That's another story. And over there, what do we say? So right now, the world is not that we have one man or one woman who is leading a company and everyone is following. But right now, we live in a world where people are experts. They are respected for that. Therefore, power is distributed to them. That's what empowering notion is preaching. And this is how organizations who take uncertainty seriously are leading the way, whereas others adopt other leadership styles or disregard it, or they adapt styles which are more efficient for their particular context, as the one that we described previously.
So, still going on in the same direction, do you see not only uncertainty, but also the volatility, which you mentioned in your thesis quite a lot? Do you see that volatility and uncertainty actually leads to the change or instability?
I believe that volatility and change is something which is part.
Volatility and uncertainty.
Yes, so I believe that the volatility and uncertainty is part of our lives, either we want it or not. I mean, look at what we are doing today. If 5 years ago someone would tell you would have an online thesis defense, how likely it would be that you would believe him or her? But still, we are changing, we are evolving. We do this online. We try to bring all the pieces from different parts of the world into one occasion in this way. Perhaps it's not the best way, or for some others it can be good. It has its pros and its cons, but we cope with that. We embrace that and we find new ways to encounter this situation. So this means that we are embracing this volatility and uncertainty that we encounter. Someone else may have said that, okay, we don't do it, or we stick to the past. Let's wait until this thing passes, and then someone will come on site and will have a proper defense. So there are different types of managing the situation, but it's a matter of a choice how we will deal with that, if we will deal with that.
Yeah, I agree. We are still dealing with that. I wouldn't say that we are changing so much, but I would say that we have found the new, let's say, balance point, that we still proceed with the defenses. We will still have the candidate and the committee, etc. And that's the way to, let's say, find the new balance point in this volatile and uncertain environment. Going back to your empowering leadership style, again, is this, kind of way to encourage employees to take more risks, as you mentioned in the, let's say, introduction, or coping with uncertainty? Or what's the difference? Because again, if you take more risk, probably the uncertainty increases. If we cope uncertainty, what does this mean?
So this is something of equal importance to discuss, and that's something that I also tackled in the discussion part with what Edgar Schein and Amy Edmondson are championing. So permission to fail, as they say that. We see the new era of organizations which is rising, particularly in San Francisco and Silicon Valley, where a psychological safety net is created. So Microsoft, for example, is sort of forcing the people to make some kind of mistakes and errors and discuss them. Of course, military and special forces that I was part of have been doing that in the past by using the scenario planning and reflection. So over there, after an operation, everyone sits down, regardless of his or her hierarchical rank, and discuss what went well or didn't go well in the operation. All in all, that kind of attempts is what? Is letting the people speak up, raise their voice, regardless of what is the status in the hierarchical chain, and acknowledge mistakes. But right now, some organizations went a step further, and they allow the people to make, let's say, control mistakes. This is where the DevOps concept comes in. You know, fail fast, succeed faster. Why? Because success can be defined by multiple failures. So the sooner someone fails, the faster can succeed. However, is this viable and is this, let's say, optimal for all organizations? That's doubtful. Some organizations, perhaps, they don't have permission to fail, as the one that we described previously. But they can create environments, control environments, where people are allowed to make a mistake and experiment themselves. So all in all, what this research proposes and this dissertation is championing is that we live in a world which is continuously more complex. New knowledge is created, and new capabilities are created, new competencies are created. Why? Because we live in a world which is at the same time very volatile, very uncertain, so this requires from us to evolve. This constant evolution brings new knowledge, which some people are carrying with them. So we need to embrace the situation and tell them that, look, I trust you to bring this task to an end. I trust you to do this autonomously. Why? Because you have the knowledge, and I'm giving you the power to combine those things and perform even better. So it brings us to a new era of thinking, a new era of working, and a new era of acting. But of course, this is up to the organization to define if it's optimal and applicable to this place. And of course, it's also up to the people to get along with this notion, because some people, they're resistant to change. They don't want to change. They say what I said previously, the alibi of the past. I used to do that. It worked perfectly. Why should I change now? But surprise, surprise, we see many things around us which don't work anymore. And that's why we say that the past is no longer a reliable predictor of the future. And if we don't change, some organizations will inevitably collapse or shrink. That's something that it's happening already. It's a reality.
Thank you. There are no more questions from my side. However, I have the possibility to forward warm greetings from Professor Kivipõld, both to Konstantinos and to Professor Levente Littvay. And Kairi also has a question to Konstantinos, and her question is, even though you don't estimate SEM, but CFA and path model separately, do you consider your final specification of the model, figure 10, casual, and why? causal, sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Should I
so
repeat?
yes, if I listen correctly, is that if the findings are considered establishing a causal relationship,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Okay. Well, certainly not. That's something that it's also discussed and it's proposed as part of the future research. And this is one of the limitations. So this is a snapshot of the reality, and hopefully, as part of the future research that either I'll be doing or someone else will be doing, we can observe the longitudinal pattern of this study, whether we can establish a causal relationship. So we start, this thesis is having the thought-provoking results by opening new avenues of thinking, new avenues of researching, and new avenues of leading. But it does not necessarily say that there has to be a causal relationship. This has to be investigated further from a scientific perspective. And of course, from a practical perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Do we have more questions? No. Just a second. Kairi is typing something.
Okay.
Thanks for the response. I'm happy with it. So, thank you, Konstantinos.
Yes, I'm happy with it.
And now I would like to give the words to Konstantinos' supervisor, Mario Martínez-Córcoles. So please, Mario, have your words.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. First of all, I would like to acknowledge EBS for the opportunity to be Konstantinos' supervisor, and of course for the support shown during the process. Secondly, I would like to thank Professors Levente Littvay and Kurmet Kivipõld their efforts to read and revise this thesis thoroughly. Their comments and suggestions were very, very useful for improving it. And I also thank them for raising such interesting questions during the debate. It was so interesting. Indeed, being honest, I wanted to jump into it, but fortunately, I know what my role is today. Last but not least, I would like to highlight important aspects of the process of working with Konstantinos, because here you have the product, which is the thesis, but I can add something else about the process of working with Konstantinos. During all this time, Konstantinos has demonstrated to be, above all, an endurance learner who has given always priority to his studies. He has been constantly involved in his doctoral thesis, not only just working on it and making standard progress, but also trying to actively improve its quality in a systematic way. Proposing, for example, new theoretical frameworks and references to be used, trying to reach a proper sample, showing me alternative methodologies, etc. Konstantinos has attended to 5 international congresses in order to present his research progresses, always seeking feedback from the audience, always seeking feedback from different sources to improve his study, his thesis. In other words, he has been establishing a high quality standard for his thesis all this time. So, well, we hope that Konstantinos' thesis can be not only just a thesis more, but a helpful work for future research in the field of empowering leadership as well. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And behalf of the Defense Committee, I would declare that the 15 minutes break we would like to use to make our final decision, and in 15 minutes you are all invited back to this online environment. Thank you. Hello back, everybody. After fierce debates, committee has made his decision, or its decision. The defendant of PhD thesis, Konstantinos Stephanou, received 3 votes in favor and 0 votes against. Thus, the Defense Committee has decided to award the degree of Doctor of Philosophy and Management to Konstantinos Stephanou. Congratulations, Konstantinos. And I can assure that although we are very close to Christmas, it's far from being just a Christmas gift, but it is well deserved. So the floor is yours for final words, please, Konstantinos.
Well, what can I say? Thank you all. It's an incredible thing because I will basically echo a poem from a Greek author about Ithaca. So PhD is not a destination, it's certainly a journey. There were plenty of cyclops, plenty of obstacles, a journey with a never-ending sense, like a marathon where I could see the end, but the end was never coming. I'm thankful for all the people who directly or indirectly helped me. They may not even know that. The catalog of the people is endless. And as I mentioned, I never aspired to do a thesis for a thesis, but I always aspire to produce knowledge that can tomorrow be useful for the people. I would like to thank also my supervisors, starting from Ruth, who is no longer with us, and I always remember her as a kind person, humble, who taught me many things at the time that we interacted, as well as Mare Teichmann, and of course Professor Mario Martínez-Córcoles, who have been with me in this journey for more than 5 years. Also, thank you to all of you for devoting the time from your busy everyday life to deal with my thesis, give me feedback, and help me to make a better work. And thank to everyone who saw us today. I hope that it was something useful for them as well. Merry Christmas to all that take the opportunity, and wish a healthy new year for you and your families. Hopefully a world with less changes, although I doubt. But yes, we need some stability somehow, yeah.
And from my side, I would like once again thank our opponents, Professor Levente Littvay and Kurmet Kivipõld, not only for being here today with us, but also contributing to the Konstantinos' work through the process. Thank you so much. It was really valuable support and contribution from your side. Also, I would like to thank our behind the curtains IT team who have made that possible. So thank you so much, Marko, Raiko, Riho. So my applause to you. And thank you everybody who attended this event. I hope you nice holidays and goodbye. Unfortunately, we can't have snacks and drinks as usual. Bye.
Goodbye. Thank you all.